It is 8:02 p.m. and I'm calling to order this meeting of the Public Works Committee to the RTM. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you for your responses regarding attending and information fed along since our last meeting. We've got several things to cover this evening. The first is a couple of announcements. If anyone watched the Rules Committee meeting, the RTM meeting for October, the full RTM, has been canceled.
Great.
The Slow Down in Darien campaign is going on, if you're familiar with that, in conjunction with the police department. There's signs downstairs, everyone saw them. Just grab one if you're willing to put in your neighborhood, where you think it needs to be placed.
Yes.
On your neighbor's lawn.
How many can I have? I know, I have one.
I got 3 18-year-old drivers, so I put it right at the end of my driveway.
Perfect.
So, and then you'll notice Mr. Kemp and Mr. Davis are here today at the Rules Committee meeting on Monday. They presented what I'll describe as a consolidation of comments and edits that they've received from members of the Rules Committee, as well as input from most, if not all, the chairs. I'll let them elaborate specifically. And Rules suggested or directed, suggested, I guess it was, the Rules Committee, that they garner any feedback, additional feedback from the respective committees of the RTM before putting this forward to the RTM. If you recall last meeting, I circulated a draft of where things stood. I forwarded, in fact, we made a motion on some of the language that was submitted to Frank and Jack. And what's come back is not just what they came back with in respect to our comments, but cross-section across all the different subcommittees. So I seized the opportunity to have them come and update us. I think you're going to update most, if not all, the subcommittees at some point. If I can have a motion to amend the agenda to have them do a brief presentation. Thank you, Paige. Second. Thank you, Rolf. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Jack, Frank, I know you have some materials to hang out.
Let them go. Well, Frank is, no, I've lost me. Well, Frank is handing it out. Let's say that this really has not been a short endeavor. About last December, we created a document called the Matrix, which you guys saw, which basically identified every grant, department, board, advisory board, and other things. And it was really started as something that actually goes back as long as Mark Thorne and I had discussed doing it many, many years ago, to help rules know who we should be assigning what everybody's responsibility is. From there, we looked at the definitions of the committees, and I don't know if you know the term gobsmacked. Gobsmacked is your mouth is your gob, and you read it and you go, because what they defined as being the responsibilities of the committees were not the responsibilities of the committees. And they included things that that F&B has jurisdiction over whether or not you get a waiver on your taxes or other things like that, which obviously we do not. It also had all of them deciding that we have comments on personnel, administration, and other things, which we do not.
Right.
All right? I showed it to Kate Bush, and her reaction was the same thing. And so the story I like to tell is that when I was a young man and I was working at a bank and we were buying another bank, and I was with a corporate attorney, and somebody was arguing a clause, he said the first thing you learn in contract law is to read the whole blooming thing. He used another word besides blooming. And when we went beyond the definitions, we started to have our mouths drop. This ordinance was written in the mid-'70s. It had some other minor modifications in like the middle of the '80s and maybe something in the '90s. They were all minor. it is before FOIA. It's very little reference to the Robert's Rules of Order. There's things that we do in the RTM and in the committees that weren't allowed. So like when the moderator says, is there any other committee that wants to report on this item? Well, that wasn't allowed in the ordinance. When I know, and especially this committee, I know F&B has done the same things, Park and Rec. When we go and do our own investigations, we have our own knowledge and other things like that. If it wasn't authorized by rules, it wasn't allowed. So looking at the sewers, understanding what's going on in there, going into drainage projects. Even Patty and Adele working on a subcommittee for parks in the Park and Rec Commission. If it wasn't authorized by the Rules Committee, we weren't really supposed to do that. And F&B's done a couple of things with the Board of Finance, which again, wasn't authorized by rules. That's no longer in here. In addition, since we're very clear that we're following FOIA and Robert's Rules of Order, there's going to be some things where it said that the committees act on the affirmative vote of the majority of the at a meeting with a quorum. Well, first of all, Robert's Rules of Order says it's not a meeting unless you have a quorum. So that was out. Then you also look at it and you realize, oh my goodness, there are times when we act when we have a negative vote. Think about with, I know we had different opinions on it, but with the stable leases, 2 of the committees had a negative vote and took action on that. You guys had a positive vote. But there's other things that you will have a negative vote on, and that may precipitate an action by this committee, all right? Overall, the whole concept is to empower the RTM standing committees to be independent entities unto themselves, where they can decide at their own discretion some of the things that you're going to be working on and what you're not going to be working on, all right? It's also to encourage, and I'm very familiar with this committee, and this is one of the special committees, because you guys have already assigned out different things and they have done it for years. But that's not the case in everybody's committee. So this is to encourage engagement from committee members, that if you're on another committee and, oh, I want to know what's going on 5 Mile River, okay, so follow that for it. And it allows people to get engaged in that. So the goal is to build consensus. This is a draft, it's a living draft. The document that we went over last Monday is not the same document that was just handed out to you. We've made changes already in it, all right? On Tuesday, we're meeting with TGS&A. On Wednesday, Park and Rec and F&B are having a joint meeting to go through this. And then the following Monday, we're meeting with Public Health and Safety. All of these will be, comments will be added and other things. And we will send to the chair, as well as members of rules, here's the key changes we're doing. If we've added a comment or taken out a word, I'm not going to bother you with that. But if we're replacing a whole section, we'll let everyone know, all right? It's not on the website because this is a living document. And people would have, we wouldn't know what version somebody's looking at. So, and it actually hasn't been approved in its total by rules. Our goal is to deal with this at the meeting in November. That's one of the other keys, and this was raised by Kate. All standing committees are in effect, and members who are on a standing committee maintain their role on that standing committee until your successor is named. So in the past, where we've had a couple of meetings where we're saying, well, the former committee did, because we're doing a November meeting in the committees. No, that committee still is in existence with the exception of people who chose not to run again. So that allows the RTM to continue to do business, which I have heard from other boards has been a major complaint. that we lose 2 months of business, but business is still going on in town. So this allows us to conduct our business. So I'm gonna go through it real quick. I promise, I'm gonna be reading off the blue copy because there's a lot of changes that have been made.
And Jack, if I can ask when you get to the section on Public Works.
I'm going to
Thank you.
talk about that. So basically on the first page, we had taken out, but then we put back in. There will be one person from each district assigned to each committee, but understand it when the Rules Committee assigns spots on that big board that has more pinholes in it than you can imagine, that person may have the name open. So if you have a committee that has 18 members' spots, but you only have 16, there may be 2 open names on there to make sure that everybody is doing it. So when they caucus in somebody new, that's the committee they're going on. Same thing, 2 members of rules are there. We changed some of the things with respect to the moderator. One of the things we did add is, because we've had it, is that sometimes the vice chair doesn't like conducting a meeting. So the vice chair of rules doesn't like conducting the meetings. So in that case, we can elect, the rules can elect an acting moderator. So should the moderator not be there, that's the person who would run the meeting. There are times when both the vice chair can also be the acting moderator.
Jack, if I can interrupt on that, so that
Sure.
applies only to Rules Committee.
Right.
Committees to the RTM, if the vice chair doesn't want to present.
We've had, if the vice chair doesn't want to present, somebody gets up and presents the committee's report. That's the reality of it. I mean, we've had that during the time when Jim Palin was the chair of F&B. I was the vice chair of education, but the person didn't like presenting who was in the Board of Selectmen side. So they just threw it over the wall and I presented for that. It doesn't really matter, just as long as somebody in this committee presents your report.
That's the
We're
question I
fine.
was really asking.
Yeah.
We're not blocked from doing that, okay.
Right. We also changed how we nominate the moderator because they were talking about committees with the moderator and everything like that, and that's not how we do it. We request that the vice chair of rules solicit names of those who are interested, that they're presented to the RTM. One of the things that we added in here, which we should have always been doing, anybody nominated to run for rules before they get to make their 2-minute speech, they have to be seconded. So, not that I'm worried that somebody won't be seconded, but that's what Robert Rules says. So we added that part in. So there'll be names that everybody has, you get that little thing, that's fine, but it still doesn't have anyone not nominate somebody else from the floor. We'll also check, because sometimes names, you can have Mark, all of a sudden, somebody's putting in Mark's name to be the moderator. And so Mark will have the opportunity to say, thank you, but no thank you. Right. So, but when you say no thank you, that's all you get to say. You don't get to talk about why. I'm going to move on D. We explained that the moderator shall chair and that the acting acts in their place. And we talked about the annual meeting, and we took out that whole section and added a whole new thing. Lois raised that at rules. Lois and I worked on it to incorporate all of what she wanted in there, and then there was some little wordsmithing because people write better than Lois and I. Getting back to the matrix. I like the term matrix. Frank thinks it's too scientific. I do think that government sometimes is science fiction, but the fact of the matter is, it's the committee's responsibilities. We're now calling it areas and entities. And that should just roll off your tongue. The fact is, we're pushing things out to the committees as well. It's the committee's responsibilities to report back to rules. The Rules Committee now controls that document, all right? If there's a new committee that comes along, or an advisory board, it's the responsibility of the committee that you guys would know about anyway to say to rules, hey, there's a new group here, put it on the list. If there's ones that are going to be done, like the Oxford Building Committee, is going to be done in about 6 months, so that gets to be taken off. So that becomes the responsibility of the committees to keep that current. And then rules will publish it on periodically, but mostly on a standing basis. Again, at the end, we put a second section, because it wasn't mentioned actually, and when Robert's Rules is mentioned in our ordinances, it's, I think, the 10th edition, and I think they're up to the 13th. So we just took out the edition. You know, it's Robert's Rules, you know, whatever the most current thing is. So then we try to incorporate some of the verbiage of what every committee does, standing committee does, in an opening paragraph. So it's things that you're following and maintaining contact with the relevant town boards, commissions, committees, departments, and officials, which I have to admit, this is one of the committees that I always want. So on 79. You guys do that. So it's nothing new, but it's to make sure that it's not written for what we do today sometimes. It's when 10 years from now, when Seth may not be here, or I may not be here, or Mark, or any of us may not be here, that the same process is being carried forward. Standard verbiage, all standing committees, this is in addition to B that we added. This is section 3 that I'm on. Is all standing committees shall comply with all state laws, codes, requirements as applicable, and observe the town charter, regulations, ordinances, and the like. We're also adding something in here, and it's very important, and actually when they tried to cut the RTM out of voting on the budget that one year, which eventually stopped. The RTM is one of the budget-making authorities in this town. In all towns that have both an RTM and a Board of Finance, both are considered by state law to be a budget-making authority, and it hadn't been stated. And the reality is, if you look what the full RTM does, we are a budget-making. And there's ways that we can actually add income. One of the ways we do that is we just change the mill rate, which we vote on every year. And in fact, unfortunately, I had to find that out the first year that I was chair. The governor had reduced some state funding coming to the town. It came back after the Board of Finance had voted on the budget. F&B approached at that time the chair of the Board of Finance and the first selectman and said, we want the money added back in. And in fact, we did by lowering the mill rate to account that we knew the town was now getting the money which had been taken out between that gap of when the Board of Finance votes and when we voted. So we are a budget-making authority. It goes into the whole thing of it, which you guys already do, but it's not just an annual budget. It's looking at the long-term plans. Which, again, you guys know what's the rollout of our drainage products. We were just talking with Frank about the sidewalks and other things like that. So it's going to, and please ask questions.
Yeah, sorry, I'm actually jumping backward to section 2. It
Yeah.
lists the standing committees. That makes a lot of sense. That's how we're organized now. you were talking about sort of future-proofing this for 10-plus years.
Yeah.
Do we need a line in the, because these committees are designed around mirroring how the town government is organized. Do we need a line in it that says, should the town government reorganize, we will match the standing committees to how the town is organized?
I will take that as a note and discuss it. I think that's a good idea. I will tell you.
Repeat that, I'm sorry?
Sure, so the way the subcommittees are organized is to mirror how the town government is organized, right? And so my point is, we're codifying something in a statute. Should we give ourselves future flexibility in the event the town chooses to reorganize? That these committees will mirror the town. The intent is to have the town.
You could add a different committee
Right,
or
but
change
the
something.
intent is to have the committees mirror how the town is organized. What if how the town is organized changes? What do we do? That's what I'm getting at. Right.
And I'll tell you, because they did the reverse. At one time, what do we have, 6 or 7 committees, 7?
We have 7 now.
I should count over there. I think we had 8 at one time. And one of the committees, they merged together. So I think having a line in there is perfect, because that is, and this is why we're doing it.
Right.
Because after you keep on reading this and reading this and reading this,
You don't see it anymore.
there's things that you don't see. So, and new eyes on this, because this is ours. This isn't Frank's and mine in the rules. This is our charter for how we're gonna operate. So, there was something else, so.
Excuse me, Jack. Roll.
Yeah, so this is Appendix B from the town charter is what we're talking about here.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, from the
Ordinance.
From
ordinances.
the ordinances.
This isn't a charter change, this is. ordinance.
No, this is an ordinance. If we change.
So to make a modification to this, it'll be referred to the RTM to go straight through with this, or?
Yes,
Okay. So if we were to have, in section 2, if we didn't have the flexibility, if we wanted to add another department because town had another department,
We
we
could.
could go through this process again.
yeah, we just
We
did.
could just do that.
But then we'd have to have the definition, but I think
Yeah.
putting it out there that we can do that doesn't have people scratching their heads saying, well, can we do this? No, we can. So I don't mind adding things along that line. Now, I'm gonna give you one of my other personal opinions. I think that one of the strengths, and actually, everybody says, oh, you guys do a lot of major projects in town, F&B handles all the numbers. The most powerful committee in the RTM is really TGS&A. Why? They control the ordinances of the town. This ordinance that we're dealing with doesn't need approval by the Board of Selectmen, doesn't need the approval, it only needs approval by us. And there's several other instances where the RTM is the sole person, or the sole group that controls the ordinances. That's pretty powerful.
Excuse me, Jack, just, we can be sensitive on.
Yeah, I'm gonna move through this real quickly. So, there was one thing that was added, because we do want committees to work, with the exception of standing committee chairs. Anyone who wants to consult on something with town council is supposed to first get permission from, approval from the moderator. That's so that we're not eating up those hours. Now, people, if you're assigned something and you're all working on something together, then Mark can have the jurisdiction to say, okay, go and call, Ralph, you go call Wayne on this and find out what's going on, all right? And that's approved because the resolution or the work's already done. The whole thing is not to hold things up, but we don't want errant calls going in there. That was a request. All right, so all prior committee definitions were eliminated. All of them. And we started looking at this and we realized the only one that said, F&B was the only one that says that we liaised with the Board of Finance. So we're the only one who really had a liaison responsibility, which is not true. Everybody here. So we now had education as liaison for it. And we're working on some of the, we currently say follow and monitor, all right? Those are words. there's a discussion of how we integrate that this is your jurisdiction as well as whatever on that. Park and Rec is the rec, and by the way, it's everything else that's on the matrix also, but that's their liaison. Planning, zoning, and housing does land use boards and commissions. Public health and safety is being rewritten because it does have several boards, and so that's, I have some verbiage from Mac and Lois that's going to be added in. Public Works. I know that you guys looked at this and you were happy with where it was before, and it came back, and I apologize, but I changed it in.
Deleted it.
Here's what it reads, because we realized you don't necessarily, with the exception of the Parking Authority and Sewer Commission, you don't really liaise directly with boards in that, but you're the one group that definitely has a liaison with the department. So you are the liaison with the Director of Public Works. Now, that also brings you occasionally into Parks and Rec, because Ed has, I never say this right, but Ed is an ex-official on the Park and Rec Commission. So there's frequently work that he's doing that has to do with Park and Rec. So it's sort of, you're in there sort of anyway. But that's why the Director of Public Works covers that whole area. Everything else we left the same, town-owned buildings, including but not limited to town infrastructure and services, and then we mentioned the parking and sewer authorities as well as the other areas assigned. I hope that you find this to be satisfactory. It is trying to give you a broader scope in what's doing. We did take out the
Incinerator?
The incinerator was demolished in 1993.
I remember.
Somebody brought me an article to show me, and I lived in town at that time, and I'm asking, I didn't even know we had one. And it turns out, if you look at the swap shop and there's those brick things up above, that's where the incinerator was. Somebody had to show me that, I had no
So,
idea.
Jack, I asked this in rules, I think I even asked it the previous rules. So by listing the parking authority and the sewer authority, but not listing some of the other boards or committees that we've liaised with in the past, like, it used to be known as recycling, now it's called sustainability.
Right.
Like the garage building committee.
Yeah.
Because this doesn't preclude that. The word assigned suggests you need permission.
As well as other areas assigned, that encompasses everything. So that's referring to
The matrix?
matrix
So
Assigned by whom?
rules, since they control the matrix.
When you say the matrix, you don't mean this thing.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So as long as it's on the matrix, we can liaise.
Right.
So in concept, new building committees formed for some new project.
You guys are
Relates to
on it.
this committee, well, rules puts it on the matrix.
Right.
They assign under primary and secondary, F&B and public works,
Yep.
and then you liaise.
You liaise. Now, here's the important thing that we added. I'm gonna try and get to it quickly, so, because you have other business to do. A committee can look at anything they feel is appropriate based upon what the committee itself says. So, if there's something going on and for some reason rules wasn't on it, or there's some things that everybody's on, like this Great Island, I haven't the faintest idea who's the primary on Great Island, all right? And it may be different primaries on each different thing. If it's bonding, F&B's primary. Everything else matters what they're doing to who is going to do it. But anything with this committee, you guys want to do a study on something, you want to look at something else because you feel that it's important, this is what you're hearing, go do it.
Where is that?
Section
Yeah, I'm gonna try and find
5?
it.
No.
Maybe. Frank, do you know where that section is? We,
But you're saying go do it without advising rules?
yeah, I don't advise rules every time F&B does something.
I mean,
and-
there's-
and-
That's what he's saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
And you're looking for, where's that
Like,
codified?
Section
like the
six, bottom of page nine.
sidewalks we were talking about, you could just do it.
yeah, if you want to,
Well, like we just did.
Yeah, we just
it.
did sidewalks.
Exactly, we didn't ask
last
anybody, we
week.
just did
right,
it. Yeah,
exactly.
cool.
This is what, look, my own personal view, this is what my personal thing is. I think this is the greatest resource of the town, this legislative body. I take great pride of being part of it, and everybody else who's here, because there's some really brilliant people in this town. And so, so I think that it's good to allow you guys to do what you think is necessary. And,
Yeah.
you know, and bring it, and by the way, if it needs to go into rules, because there's something you want to take an action on, similar to how there was the discussion on the SROs, bring it to rules, and it can get onto an agenda, so there can be a presentation or other things like that.
So 6 seems to be saying anything coming
Yeah.
into rules is delegated by rules. Anything can permeate from the committees up.
Yeah, well, you can work on it and then go up, yes. So, yeah, it gave the authority that the committees can do some of their own. That doesn't mean that we're gonna harass the departments, chairs and everything, because they're actually paid, but it doesn't,
Well, the standard protocols, though,
Still
being
in place.
respectful
Yeah.
of town resources and consolidating and having a kind of a focal contact.
and I can
Apply.
speak at least a little bit from F&B. Sometimes we've done a lot of work with the Board of Finance, because everybody on the Board of Finance has a job, but some of us on F&B are retired. So we could supply, and there's only 3 people in our finance department in reality, for a $50 million business. So we could provide the resources to do the analysis and then bring it back and jointly come to a conclusion. That's how we cleaned up the reserve accounts. That's how we cleaned up the reserve fund for capital. We initiated, spoke to John said, go do it. But that's what I think happens here, and I'm sure Ed would appreciate doing some analysis as well, because he doesn't have a whole team of people to do analysis.
Again, perhaps related to what you've done.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect, I'll leave.
Yeah.
Jack,
So-
can I raise one question when we're defining public works?
Yeah.
On page 7, subsection 6 here, sorry. I'm just looking for-
Yeah, I'm gonna go so I can use those things.
Yeah, and I don't want to cause a big debate, as I read this now, and maybe this was in the last version, in the second to last line, including but not limited to other town infrastructure and services.
Yeah.
The "and services" there gives me agita, because there's a lot of services the town does that are unrelated to public works. So
Would you like us,
I suggest you might want to narrow that "and services," because I feel like it's overly broad.
okay, so, it is. And the reason is, though, I'm not so astute, like, when they snow plow, to me, that's a service.
Right.
So I was thinking,
Yeah,
tree pickup,
tree pickup, other things like that.
Bulk
When we
pickup.
used to have the junk pickup, where
Yep.
first
Leaf
people
pickup.
used to pick first, and then they'd pick up the rest.
There's a lot of services the town does that ought to be included in our section. There's a lot of services the town does that shouldn't be
Shouldn't be.
included in our section. And I don't know if you
So-
necessarily want to delineate that here or not.
If-
Again, I don't want to word
I'll give you a challenge.
Appropriate
Yeah.
services or something?
Come with a word that you feel is appropriate, or a phrase that comes in there, and we're putting it in.
Services relating to.
that's the purpose of this.
Got
It
it.
kind of is the
Services
same,
for
it's
areas
the same
assigned.
part of that sentence, though, if you kind of look, it's, at the beginning of that sentence, it says, as well as monitoring and reporting on all town-owned or operated public work facilities, and including but not limited to other town infrastructure and services. It's referring back to town-owned and
Back to public
operated
works.
That's how I took it.
public works facilities, you know what I'm saying? Because it's still a part of that sentence.
But I don't
In my
mind,
mind.
I don't mind saying, but not limited to other town infrastructure and services, instead of related, how about provided by?
Or yeah, you could just say other related town infrastructure.
by Public Works, and that brings it back to you.
Thank you.
Because it
Yeah.
also allows, when you guys, when one of your last meetings, as was saying, look, we're fixing the doors, or maybe it was in your meeting, we're fixing the doors on the other meeting that you're on, the Great Island one, that I'm fixing the doors on the mansion. So, all right, that's not here, but yes, that's Public Works people doing something, so it's there. So, yes, I don't mind adding clarity.
Thank you.
So,
Any other comments, thoughts?
last one, which we're debating on,
Mhm.
and that is, just wanna make sure I'm not missing anything.
Where are you?
That's, I'm on 6, RTM Rules Committee moderator, to be appropriate for a report and review, any manner standing at the meeting or requesting a replacement of the matter in the warning. That second paragraph in section 6 is,
Any matter?
says, if you guys are doing something on the sidewalks and you want to present or bring something up to bring forward, yes, do.
Bring forward
The
to,
full
I haven't seen the
RTM,
full
the
floor
road.
of the
The RTM.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that's
To
what
the
I
floor.
took it as.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, that's how the SROs were discussed and things like that. Last thing is minutes. Now, I'm an old person, so I still deal with draft minutes and approved minutes,
Oh,
all right? Apparently, FOIA only deals with minutes. And the issue that we have is, should a minute be amended? Because, you know, does anybody have a correction to the minutes? And somebody raises their hand and says, yes, you misspelt my name. Well, apparently, that doesn't get corrected in the minutes that you just corrected. It gets corrected in the
The new
next
minutes.
meeting's minutes.
Right, right.
Which means your name's still wrong,
Right, right.
all right? And there's no way, and if it's an issue, there's no way because I use minutes sometimes to find out when we did something and follow the trail of something in history.
This makes it much harder.
So
You don't
ju-
even
just-
know it
Almost
exists.
impossible.
I went around and around on this in rules, Jack. So you
Yeah.
amend it in the next meeting's minutes. You attach it to the minutes of that meeting. Is it not then memorialized?
Yeah, that's what I think.
That's what I,
Yeah.
We've requested that at least you put a
Yeah.
reference that these minutes have been amended on this
Yes,
thing.
please see the
Yeah,
amendment.
see
on-
this, because otherwise, you never know.
It does take longer though, and that's super annoying.
Well, it's
If
even
you were
more annoying
researching
that the new, the old
Yeah, if you were
minutes
trying to go
are
through the threads.
And-
And
don't
then you had to
label-
read the whole other minutes?
don't,
That'd
don't
be-
label the minutes draft.
No, just
I
minutes.
failed that test this week.
I can-
Exactly
Which
how
is
we
why
do
they're
it.
now called version 1.
Yeah. I'm going to use that because we still call it
You
draft.
gotta keep
minutes.
track of it when you do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so here's the deal. We're giving this to you. Read it. The goal is to hand this out to everyone, and, you know, we'll let you know what's going on. Yeah, as I said, if a major section gets deleted or added, we've taken out things that just didn't, oh, here's the other change. It said that the moderator used to assign all committees, which I don't know what rules did that. So we changed it, that's actually, the rules committee does that. But in an important meeting, without rules, the moderator can do it. So,
When
You have-
rules can't convene for some reason.
right. So you have Frank's and my email. If you don't, I can give it to you. It's very simple. It's Jack Davis, RT, I should give you my government.
I'll circulate it.
Yeah, it's jdavis@ct.gov. So, and Frank, you know, send us, read it. If you have a question, call us. We're open to suggestions. We have it on the agenda for November. The goal is to have this right.
Before it gets on the agenda, it needs to come before rules and be
Yes.
finalized.
Yeah. Who will still be in existence, because we haven't had the meeting to elect those people. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you for
Frank, thank you.
a lot of
Thanks
stuff.
for all your work.
into this.
on that.
Thank you for a lot of stuff that you guys do.
Where does the full version of areas and entities be accessed?
The 2022-23 version was issued at the beginning of the legislative year, and what we anticipate is that an updated version will be issued soon for the next legislative year.
Okay.
Where does it reside?
It doesn't right now.
Right now,
It
if I
should-
wanted to find this somewhere.
It's not
I
on
could
there.
do it.
I think
You
what
would
we
find it
need,
in the distribution for the RTM meeting of December.
In the minutes as amended on whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right.
Ralph, it should be on the town website, all right? I haven't had a chance to update it. We don't even have Great Island, and we want to change the format of what it was, because, you know, you started looking at everything, and F&B was secondary on everything, and just get things done. The other thing, which is actually part of the buddy system, is the old rules, which is something that we've been doing and I think works very effectively, and I know John Zagrosky likes it and would like to continue it in the role of first selectman, is F&B will assign 1 or 2 people to each committee as a liaison on financial matters, all right? But that was really our buddy system to begin with. So.
Yeah, when I was on
we
this
continue-
committee, I liaised with.
Right,
F&B.
you
When I
were
was on
on the
F&B, I
banks,
liaised with
right,
this,
yeah. So, and then we liaise back and forth, so that just keeps communications open only on financial matters. And if you've seen, we're only talking about finances, and when F&B does reports, we're letting the committees give the detail, because they know it a lot better than we do. Thank you.
Jack, thank you. Frank, thank you.
So now I have to watch for this being recorded so I can see what's said on the site.
Jack said that I
Welcome to
objected
stay.
to that matrix was too scientific. The real thing was, I thought it was too science fiction.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So we areas what you will see in December is the modern version of, this is just 1 page or something like that, it's 10 or 12 pages long. And Jack started putting together which committee was assigned to what activity. I thought there'd be about 10 or 15 items. But when that list was finished, it now has like 103. It's absolutely amazing the different organizations within the town that make the town work. Varying from departments in this building and all the commissions and committees.
So I know it's a living, reading document, is the
And
thought.
the nice thing about the whiskey and the highball and all this is that each of those committees or entities is assigned to one of our standing committees. And that, it makes all the difference. And the enumeration of powers, the enumeration of things that were in the prior version had holes in it. And the general way that these descriptions are made is a net effect of empowering the committee. And so in a way that hasn't been before, which we hope will be durable. Thank you.
The last question
edits.
on that, okay.
Yeah, one more thing on edits. The floor is open for, as you can see, this was dated the 10/4/23 version. There've been a couple prior to get it ready to this, and I anticipate there might be a couple more changes. For example, the suggestions that we received tonight in the word code. The document has been submitted to town council for preliminary review with the understanding that changes are underway. And so before we actually have a document on the floor in November, town council will have approved and will prepare so that some of the paragraphing formats that look a little nimsy right now, it's because they don't have all that word processing skills to make the indentation. But the basic thing is there, and also capitalization. We need to go through there with a style book and see whether you capitalize moderator or you don't, and we do it all the same. Please send in your suggestions.
What he lacks in word skills, he makes up in his understanding of the ordinances.
So please send in your suggestions to Mark, to us, or to John, or to me.
Yeah, I have a good question. In just reviewing this, and I know some of you saw the last one, this is the new version. Are you guys comfortable with this?
Yeah.
Sounds like a boilerplate, I mean, you're trying to get the boilerplate right.
Yeah, but that's important, because this is, we want to make sure everybody's comfortable.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think clarity in the definitions was.
It's a good idea to do.
now, the other thing you may not realize, but you may have an epiphany later, F&B's pushing stuff out of its committee onto the other steering committees.
Well, I figured that out.
Yeah, well, somebody thought I was taking things in.
Picked up
and
on
was
that,
saying,
wrong.
Yeah.
No, we're
Jack's
not.
like,
So Jack, usually this committee's not too shy about sharing the
I've noticed.
but you've offered up direct line of communication.
Super, thank you so much, appreciate
Thank you.
it, have a fun meeting,
Thank
and
you.
thank
Thank
you,
you.
it's quicker than rules.
Yes, thank you, fellas.
Thanks.
All right, to continue with the agenda, thank you for your attention and patience with that. Next up, let's see, the announcements, I did, we're not, it's not necessarily over, this was meant to cover this. I was at the transfer station last week,
Oh, yeah.
and I saw work being done on the floor, that's one of the line items on the ARPA funds. My printer was running out of color.
I saw the sweeper there and I thought of everyone,
Yeah.
and I took a picture.
Next up on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from September 7. I distributed them twice by mistake, I apologize.
Don't get too much minutes.
The minutes, not the draft minutes. Any questions, comments, concerns? May I have a motion to approve the minutes from September 7? Paige, Frank? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention. You got that? You got it, right? Go on. You don't, let me fill it out. Thank you. Reason I do this is the minute the votes are due, 24, 48 hours, those are due 7 days. I know you won't take that long, but just in case. Next up was supposed to be the Public Works union contract. At rules, it was discussed that the union is on the verge of approving that contract. When that occurs, from what I understand, you have 30 days for it to run through its approval process through the RTM. So there was a possibility it was going to be fully ratified in time for us to get a packet to consider here. That did not happen, so we'll table that item until next meeting. I don't know if they end up approving it, if we'd have to hold a special meeting. It sounds like we might have to. It all depends on whether or not, when it's approved by the membership. I want to keep rolling here because I want to get to this presentation. So I don't know if I can go out of order for the focus areas. On the finance and budget side, I don't have any update. At rules, Jack confirmed there is not a scheduled ARPA committee meeting. There needs to be one. But he wasn't aware of one. I'm not aware of one. You're making a face like you don't know.
no, I'm not aware of one, but I am anxious about it.
Yep, and I am as well, so as is Jack, as am I. So no update there, and nothing up on the budget side. And that takes us to roads, sidewalks, which is where I've slotted the pedestrian infrastructure advisory committee subcommittee's review. Before we kick it off, I want to thank the four of you for the time, three, that are here.
Just before you launch into that, which I'm grateful for, do you want to knock out the other things on the list here? Because those are pretty,
Those first. and-
those,
Yeah, we can get through those quickly.
if we can get through all those quickly, then there's nothing pending after
Yep.
the sidewalk. I'm
Yeah.
glad to volunteer.
Now, let's
The PS report at the end, if you want, if that makes sense.
Let's just get into it.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just if we can, we'll just continue.
Sure.
So thank Ed, who I know liaised with
Absolutely.
over the past week and a half. I guess it's been a pretty intense week and a half, so I thank you for that. And while there was some intense back and forth there, and his time was appreciated, this was I don't call it a one-time project, but a special project that he did indulge, and I'm appreciative of that. And we all know the protocols. We try to be respectful of town staff time and consolidate our questions when reaching out. So I want to thank the Public Works Department for the time they spent on this, and of course the four of you for the effort you put into it. And with that, Frank, I'll let you just kind of.
Thank you, Mark, I appreciate that. And so I would also echo Mark's comments that I want to thank Rolf and Vinnie who are here tonight, Pat Kane and Jeff Kraus for their contributions to this committee. I think in a small amount of time we covered a lot of ground, so I'm grateful for that. And when you see some of the output that we've been able to generate, and particularly some of the stuff that I can't share because it's too big,
Yes.
I think you'll be suitably impressed. I also want to thank Ed Gentile for his support for our team. He was party to a series of emails going back and forth, and in fact, even though he's under the weather this week, he managed to get us the beautiful new map, which is also going to be received by everyone. So again, I think a lot of credit goes around for
Yes.
a lot of work in a small amount of time. So
Yes, a lot of work was done in a very short period of time.
Yep. So with that said, I'm going to take just 30 seconds and administratively, because I have a quorum of my subcommittee here. You both.
Actually, let's be careful now. This
is not a subcommittee meeting, right?
Yeah, this hasn't been a warned meeting.
It's not. Can we approve the minutes?
I don't know. I want to be careful on that. I don't know.
Got it. All right.
We can always do that another time.
We'll do that another time. Right. All right. So, gentlemen, I
have
look forward to our approval of these minutes at an appropriately warned meeting.
Of the subcommittee.
If whenever exists, because we don't plan to,
No, I think we're gonna have one more meeting.
I guess we are.
So we can-
But then we'll have to have minutes of that meeting. All right, so.
We'll get clarity on how to handle that.
So we just want to wrap it up. So with that said, I have a packet here for everybody, and there's a number of materials here. So I'm going to start some going this way, and some.
Take one.
Take one, please. We'll pass them around. I'll take any extras. Oh, I need one of those back. Planning.
While those are being passed around, if I could ask a question, Mark.
Yes, sir.
You know, when a subcommittee, like the one Frank chaired, has documents that they want to share with us all, is there any provision to get copies made without Frank going to, the FedEx store and paying for that himself?
I have never, the things that have been distributed, I've typically received from the clerk. I've not actually requested anything, but things like hard copies of the budget. I know there's a mechanism. Typically those requests are around budget season and are directed to the clerk's office. So I don't know if that's the conduit. I can find out, but something like this, Ed did this, or this team.
No,
You
No,
did.
you-
Frank? Yeah, that's usually how I do
Yeah.
it. I just print it. But, yes.
I bet you can probably have the clerk print it, would be my guess.
Let me check on the proper protocol. I just know that that's
I'm gonna
typically
guess
where
that.
the information comes from for rules and budget season, but I don't have much experience much beyond that, beyond doing it myself.
Right. Generally, just because we were trying to be nimble and
Yeah.
and move
Right,
quickly.
it'll take a while.
I just,
Yeah.
we made the documents, we had the deliberations, I just printed it up.
Yep.
There we go. I'm
And
not
that's
asking for
appreciated.
reimbursement.
No, I understand.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through the presentation here, which is 9 slides. They're pretty straightforward. And then I'm going to talk about some of the attached documents that are behind that as well. Page 1 is real simple. It's just a cover slide. This is our final report from the Pedestrian Infrastructure Subcommittee of the Public Works Committee of the representative town meeting of the town of Darien. It's quite a mouthful. And again, the members were myself, Vinnie, Jeff Krause, Pat Kane, and Rolf Oben was the vice chair. So the second slide is just some context here. Remember, pedestrian infrastructure is a long-standing issue of concern for this committee. It was in fact this committee's resolutions that catalyzed the formation of the original PIAC back in 2015. And it was interesting to hear Jack's comments a few minutes ago that we're encouraging the committees to kind of create and generate things, because 8-9 years ago that created a lot of consternation, as Mark, I'm sure you recall.
Yes, I do.
So I'm glad to see that we are encouraged to kind of come up with our ideas. Exactly. As long as we're within our ambit of responsibility. The PIAC delivered its final report in December 2015, which included a broad range of recommended improvements and additions, and their 4 areas were sidewalks, crosswalks, bike lanes, and lighting improvements. And the Public Works Department has undertaken a lot of the things that were discussed over the last 8 years, and anything I say here should not be construed in any way to be critical of the work that Public Works has done, because I think they have operated effectively and efficiently within their scope of responsibility as defined by the Board of Selectmen. Right. More recently, in our last month's meeting, Public Works established this temporary subcommittee to evaluate how much of the PIAC's recommendations were delivered. And so our job is to review the December 2015 report and assess the degree to which those recommendations have been delivered. Slide 3 is basically the snapshot summary of that PIAC report. That was a 132-page document, still available on the town website, or at least it was as of a couple weeks ago. I know the town website has gone through some transformations and things may be a little harder to find now. I have a copy in case anyone needs it, but this table here is the summary of what was recommended by that PIAC report. And just to summarize for folks on 79 who may not be able to see it, there were 115 spots in town where crosswalks were either recommended or identified as a possibility to improve pedestrian safety. There were 25 locations in town where sidewalks were recommended or suggested, again, as a place to improve pedestrian safety. There were 27 spots in town that were identified for bike lanes, and 17 opportunities to improve lighting in a way that would help pedestrian and bike traffic. I will say that the bike lanes, just if you read through that report, I mean, bike lanes by their nature, like they're all connected, right? So to a certain degree, there are 27 spots with the bike lanes, but it's really kind of more a vision of a network, and we'll come back to that in a minute. And again, that PIAC report from December 2015 ran to 132 pages. So on slide 4, what have we done in the last 4 weeks? So we've met on a weekly basis to review that report and to kind of compile what it said to see to what degree those suggestions have been delivered on. We reviewed the PIC report. We also reviewed some materials from Ed Gentile, and those are attached behind here. In particular, the very last page of your packet looks like this. Very tiny type, a little table. This is a list complete, I believe, as of 2012.
Wow.
Of all the asphalt and all the concrete sidewalks that existed in town as of 2012. The 2 pages prior to that, which are landscape style, is a listing of all the sidewalk only improvements that have been made in town. The data since Ed started in 2014, we're confident is complete and accurate. The listing does go back to 1999. We're not certain that everything before Ed's tenure is complete and fully vetted. But certainly the work since Ed joined 9 years ago in 2014, we're comfortable is complete and accurate.
But so in theory, the gap year is 2013, because if the last page is snapshot of 2012, and we know 2014 plus changes are right,
Right.
the real gap is 2013.
If anything was done in 2013 at all.
Right.
And I don't know if there was. What I would note for you on this listing here, again, I'm going to just, for the benefit of folks in the room, the second of the 2 landscape pages looks like this. It's about 2/3 of a page, and 4 lines of this are kind of dark golden color, right? Those 4 lines, those 4 items in this table are the only new sidewalks that have been created since 2014. So all the other sidewalk projects are maintenance, repair, upgrade from asphalt to concrete. And there's been a lot of good and valuable work done here. I can just speak to the stuff that's in my neighborhood in District 6 on Tokenique Road. There's a small piece, one of these golden sections is a new section of a sidewalk along Tokenique Road. But there's multiple other segments that are listed here in this table that were repaired and that were really quite necessary because they were in pretty decrepit shape. And so, again, the repair and the upgrade moves here are also quite valuable. So I mentioned that Ed had given us...
If I can
please go ahead.
interrupt there. To your point about upgrades, I know there was a concerted effort for a number of years to upgrade, not just to improve sidewalks that were in poor shape, but to upgrade to concrete. I know in some of the ones in my neighborhood, or my area, around Middlesex, for instance, that was shocking, that was asphalt, and they were similar.
Right, and so the context on that, right, is that an asphalt sidewalk is much less durable, lasts probably 15 to 25 years, much more prone to root invasion, much more prone to all the things that kind of impact blacktop and asphalt, whereas the concrete sidewalks are more expensive to install, but last 75 to 100 years in the planning horizon. So it lasts a lot longer, but you have to make a much bigger investment.
And I noticed where most of where this has been done, have also been made much more substantial.
Correct.
Versus the winding asphalt.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's a number of places where you still see an asphalt sidewalk in town, which is kind of like, here's where the cow path used to run in there before the road came in. And concrete sidewalks are much more.
Right. I mention that because you're aware of it, many of the folks around this room or a table are aware of it, but it's not obvious.
Right. Agreed.
Hey Frank, on slide 3, there's 11 new, this from 2015 report, there's 11 new potential sidewalks identified.
Yep.
And we have the 4 gold ones here on this landscape slide.
Yep.
Were these 4 amongst the 11 that were recommended?
Excellent question. We'll get to that, but the short answer is 2 of the golden ones were included in the list of items that were suggested by the PIAC, and 2 of the golden ones that were done by Public Works were not on that list of projects. Not to say they weren't valuable, I think they were, but they weren't on the PIAC's list. The final item that Ed gave us was, he first gave us an original version, and then just yesterday I received this revised version of the full map of the sidewalks in town. This map adds all the work that's been done since the prior map we had, which was 5 years out of date. Correct some errors. This map is generated by the town's GIS, the Geographic Information Service, right? So it's actually incredibly high resolution. You can't really see it on this paper, right? But when you use it on the computer, it's very detailed. You can go online and you can blow it up, and you can really zoom right into the neighborhood. And what's great about the map, and you might be able to see it on the large print out there, is that there are, in fact, different, like it codes properly whether something is on the north side or the south side of the street. So if the sidewalk, it's not just the road of a sidewalk, but precisely where does it start, precisely where does it terminate, and precisely which side of the street is it on, which is really critical if you're actually planning for sidewalks and crosswalks.
Right.
So again, kudos to Ed for managing that data, and kudos and thanks to his colleagues in the Planning and Zoning Department for updating the map. So I'm going to go back to my slide here. My computer's acting up. So I think that takes me to the end of still on slide 4 here very quickly. So that's all the stuff we got. And then what we developed a kind of a summary table of all the suggestions and recommendations from the PIAC report, and kudos in particular to Rolf here, who went through that with a fine-tooth comb and added further information from Jeff Krause. But really, Rolf was the engine on that, so I really appreciate your hard work on that, Rolf. And then I cross-reference that against the data Ed provided to tell whether to answer, bring up your question a moment ago, Pat. So I'm moving on to slide 5. Like, what was the initial review of that PIAC report? So kind of, what did it say, right? I mean, brain stall.
No worries.
Yeah, reboot.
You see plenty of mine.
So, just trying to look at, put that PIC report in context for what Public Works has been doing, right? So for sidewalks, the town has pursued a consistent program of maintenance and upgrades, right? Most of the projects have been maintenance, repair, and upgrades, asphalt and concrete. The 4 new projects do have an aggregate linear distance of 2,800 feet, which I guess for us on the subcommittee seemed a little underwhelming for new sidewalks in a 9-year span. Again, in context, the PIC report had recommended up to 25 potential new sites for sidewalks and extensions. Looking at crosswalks, there is no similar database of crosswalks, as far as we know, comparable to the database that Ed maintains of the sidewalks. Just with our kind of understanding of what's happened in town and our experience on the committee, we know that there have been crosswalks that have been maintained and repainted. We know that there have been a few new crosswalks that have been put in, with signage, things like that. The one that comes to mind for me, again, going back to my neighborhood in Tokenique Road, there's a new crosswalk across Tokenique, just to the east of the I-95 overpass that connects the legacy sidewalk, which is now which is now concrete, to the new sidewalk, which is on the south side of the street that goes all the way into town, right? And so there's a crosswalk there that kind of gets you.
It'd be interesting to know how many there are that have been added. For instance, I live near the high school, and I don't know if the other schools experience this, but there's several new crosswalks in this span of time.
Okay.
Because there was a period of time where a lot of them went in all at once. Several across Monroe Avenue, down near the ball field, up near the high school. So I have no way of knowing how many, but I suspect a few suggest 3. I think I can count 3 just on that one road. But,
Okay. So again, without a database,
Yeah.
it's hard for us to really
Understood.
know, and we kind of circumscribed our responsibility here. We didn't want to be doing field work
Yep.
on this subcommittee just because we didn't have the time to.
Understood.
To pull that together.
Manpower.
Could be a next year project
That-
for us to
yeah.
create one.
Right, kind
Possibly.
of bite-sized pieces here.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Regarding bike paths, there have been no installations by Darien Public Works. There have been some share the road signs posted in the last few years by other parties like the police department, or perhaps there were other parties besides the PD. Pat Kane felt pretty strongly that the PD had been responsible for at least some of those share the road signs. And we know, Mark, you had mentioned at the last meeting that Darien and Canaan are considering or coordinating efforts to make a request to Westcog for a combined bike path kind of design structure
I
that would
believe
span
grant is
both.
pending. I think it's past the thought. I think the grant is pending. And so I can't recall if Ed touched on this when he was here, or he shared that with us when I met with him, that as a result of that ongoing effort, any pursuit of bike paths was put on hold pending
Right.
the outcome of that. Okay.
Understood.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is a recent development.
Relatively
Over
recent,
the
yes.
prior
Right, nothing
7 years, like, other than some share the road signs, we hadn't done very much.
understood.
Lighting is reviewed in the analysis, but not anything we had time to address. So I'm on my slide 6 now. In the yellow box, really the most important consideration we're coming to is that most of the needs identified in the PIAC report have not been addressed, right? We think that the overall pace of the maintenance and repair appears reasonable to us, right? There's good work that's been done, but the pace of adding new sidewalks and crosswalks is really not sufficient, right? I won't go through all these, but there are still critical gaps in all the focus areas, so near all the schools, near the railroad stations, and near the town center. You know, again, top end of Hoyt Street, the Edgerton Street connection to West Avenue, you know, the entire length of Gardner Street. You know, these were areas that were identified as key focus points in the PIC report and have not been addressed.
Gardner's bad.
Crosswalks, sorry?
Gardner is bad.
Yep, well, I mean, I just think in my mind, where do I see people walking in the street?
I walk on Gardner all the time.
Right, so
So
that's,
bad.
that's a problem,
Yeah,
right?
it's a problem.
So is the why funding? Why hasn't this been done?
Well, I was getting ready to
So,
suggest, this doesn't address the why, whether it is
So
it funding.
you told me to get to just the facts, I'm just giving you the facts.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have
We tried to
to,
stick to the
I think we're gonna have to
facts
come back to.
Sorry, I'm out of scope.
That's okay, no. So I think to a certain degree, funding is an issue, right? We need to come to funding. And to a certain degree, there has been, like, some of the things that have been easier to tackle have been tackled. And so if we want Ed to tackle some of the things that are harder, we are gonna need to instruct him that these are real priorities in town and you need
Or-
to focus on them.
Perhaps some of the issues that are, like some of the things, he's told us it's too difficult to get, you know, state approval or whatever. Maybe we take it upon ourselves to help him get that state approval, because as they were just saying, he's one person, he has a
Right.
small staff, like maybe that's something we could tackle then to say, hey,
So it's a matter of,
Metro North,
it ends up being a matter of resource. Do we have
correct.
the dollars, the
Right.
staff time,
Or
legal
maybe
resource?
when the budgeting process comes around, we say, hey, there's not enough in here for new sidewalks, if that's a priority, or,
Right.
I don't know. I mean, if we are in fact able to create the budget,
So I don't wanna, like, you need to get through
Sorry.
the
Yeah.
facts.
We're most of the way there.
It
We're good.
feels to me like the outcome of this is not, it's not just a money problem. right, so there are other
The
things like
resources
staff.
problem, I think, is the way
Right,
to
and
structure.
so that will require a more nuanced approach than just throw money at it. It's not capital.
Well, it's two sides, right? It's,
Time.
are we spending the right amount of money,
Right.
right? And I would argue we have the ability to spend more, right? But that's a budgetary process. Secondary, within that budgetary process, if you have $1 million or $2 million to spend on sidewalks, what are the priorities that you really want to focus on, right? I mean, are you putting, are you addressing the things that are that are most valuable for the community or high priority for the people who are using those sidewalks?
And to that point, the initial report, did it tier? I suspect what this committee, what the folks around this table are saying is probably accurate. There's financial reasons in some instances, there's access reasons for some, in some instances, there's permitting or governmental approval
Right.
issues in some instances, maybe multiple of these issues on certain of these projects.
But maybe a primary issue would be Board of Selectmen focused on it.
Which ones to focus on,
Right.
hit a dead end, pivot to the next one.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
So I think there's an
As
And
opposed to-
I just think in general, you know, other things
Resources.
happen and
Mhm.
this gets shoved aside.
So there's a question of
Priority shift.
resources, a question of attention, and a question of prioritization,
Yeah,
right? So, I mean, those are the key
absolutely.
things we're trying to navigate through.
Okay.
The things that are,
Yep.
the things that have been easier to do have
Low-
gotten their
low-hanging
attention,
fruit,
right?
yeah.
So if we now like, again, I know this is a hot potato, but at the top end of Hoyt, right? Approaching Thomas Hill Station, we still have people walking in the street, and that's been a issue for
And it's
many
difficult because the
years.
state's involved.
It's one of the more
Right.
difficult places because it's a state road.
Right.
It's very difficult because there are obstacles in the right of way,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
light poles that are in the right of way that would require interaction with the utility to deal with. So that's probably one of the highest degree of difficulty. But if we decide that's really what we want to do, then we, speaking as the town, need to focus Ed on solving that problem, even if it means you have, to put that to the top of his list.
So do we risk picking any one project, I'm not saying which one, and focusing on it, and risk 3 years from now, doing our update and realizing not much else got updated because we threw our resources behind us?
I'll come back to that, but it's a reasonable point. So just trying to wrap up slide 6, again, the sidewalks, there's still critical gaps in all the focus areas near schools, railroad stations, and town center. The crosswalks, there's still a number of opportunities to improve pedestrian safety that remain unaddressed. You know, some of the ones that have got highlighted were Post Road, kind of in the area of the Darien Railroad Station. There's the south side, Post Road south of the tracks, where people kind of jaywalk to CVS and down Tokenique Road. And then there's Post Road on the north side of the tracks, where people are jaywalking to their cars on the Mechanic Street parking lot, or folks who are up Mansfield Avenue, who kind of are cutting through, cutting across west to get through Tilly Pond Park to get up to up Mansfield. So like there's legitimate needs in all those areas, right? We also talked about Middlesex Road, kind of starts near the Stamford line at Hoyt Street / Christie Hill, and it extends all the way to Hollow Tree Ridge, right, and further. But in that stretch from Hoyt Street to Hollow Tree, there's about 7 or 8 cross streets where people, with the sidewalks on the south side of the street, and the streets extend to the north side of the street, and there's no crosswalk to get across, right? And what can we do about those?
Those are also problematic because of the hill there, as cars come speeding by.
Absolutely. Well, it's a nice long straightaway, which you don't have very many places in town. And people do tend to, and I'm guilty as charged.
You lit up as you said that, yes.
Oh, yeah. Get that baby to rip. And bike paths, we were talking about bike paths a second ago. So I'm gonna go on to slide 7 here. Just a couple of elements of context here. Since the PIC report was delivered in 2015, you know, number one, we have several new developments in town, right? And some of them, but not all of them, considered sidewalks. And the ones, these are the ones we know about. Corbin District downtown, the Federal Realty and the Palmer's project in the Norton Heights area, and the Oxridge rebuild and Hindley Homes and Royal renovations. Like, so these are all big projects that have been done. I do not believe that they have all considered sidewalks as a component of their process. We were,
Yeah, let me ask about that.
Wait, that can't be.
I'm familiar with the complexes in my district, and that's the Road Heights project.
okay, Well, I know
That one
that.
definitely has
That
sidewalks.
has
Yeah,
all
this-
the
yeah.
Corbin
stamp
District
there.
definitely has
Right, so
sidewalks.
so Corbin's got sidewalks, but I mean, again, was it part of a larger traffic management process? I mean,
Oh, was it done within the isolation of that project versus?
or was it
part of the
integrated
big-
into, like, how does it fit into the network of the rest of the pedestrian infrastructure?
Well, Ed's actually been in this committee and explained the ones around the Heights tying in, I think they put them on the north and the south side of, what's that?
Actually, the Heights is one of those ones that wasn't on the PIC.
Well, I was gonna ask that question, so it's not, I don't know if it's
Well,
shown here or not.
there's a give and a take here, right? So we know that there was one of the two sidewalk projects that was not on the PIC report that was nonetheless done, was on Ledge Road from Norotan Avenue westbound down to Post 53. Right, so that was
Yep.
certainly valuable, right?
Yeah, that's an
But-
important one.
But, but it was not on the PIC report, right? On the other hand, on the PIC report was on Heights Road, the south side of Heights Road, from the depot up to Norotan Avenue, where right now there's a big berm and a traffic guardrail and all that, but for all the people who wanna leave the train and walk up to Norotan Avenue and then head south, like, do they cross the street, go up 50
Right.
yards, then cross
And
again?
cross
No,
over,
they
yeah.
just walk on the street, right?
Yep.
So, again, and that, to me, that would be like an easier one to solve, because it's not private land, it's either town land or state land, like where that, barrier is, right? That seems to be one of the easier ones to address.
You're talking about that strip from the end of the parking lot?
Yeah, it's a short little bit.
Is there room there? I don't know.
I mean, anything, you can make a room, right?
Is it easy?
Well, look, there's enough room for like.
It's hanging off a cliff, but anyway.
There's a little patch of grass and there's like the traffic barrier, so.
I don't know, I'm not an expert.
I'm a
But
finance
yeah,
nerd, not a
it
traffic
is
nerd.
weird to walk in the street there, I totally agree.
Right.
It feels like a death trap, because everyone's trying to like
Yeah.
rush to get into the train, and you're like, you're gonna kill someone.
Yeah, and I'm more familiar with it, like trying to leave there as you're walking up, and people are kind of zooming up and trying to either make the hard left or hard make the right, you know. It's-
But like with many of these, I'd be curious as to what are the issues with that one.
Right. Secondarily, so again, on slide 7, like what has changed since the PIC report? Number one, there's new developments in town. Number two, the pandemic has changed how we work in town, right? So we need more access to points in town, and we need more access to transportation networks beyond the town, mostly Metro North, but also bus, also bike. And we know we also have many new residents in town because we have all these new developments that have sprung up. We probably have hundreds of new housing units in town with a lot of people who would presumably want to access pedestrian infrastructure. It's one of the things that makes Darien distinctive. And then third, state priorities and funding are increasingly emphasizing pedestrian access. Pedestrian deaths are increasing in Connecticut, 22 over 21 and 21 over 20, and the state has made it a priority to reduce those pedestrian deaths.
Deaths and injury.
Let's take some money.
Yep. And the state actually has a program, and we've talked about this before, called Complete Streets, which was kind of a slogan back at the time of the PIAC report, and now it is more than a slogan. It's a set of enumerated design principles. How do you design for complete streets, and what does that look like? And it's very precise. It's on the state website. Complete streets means you are planning for multimodal vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians, and here's how much space you must allocate. It's very precise.
Is there money set aside for it?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's funny you mention that, and we'll get to that. So again,
Money and space, I bet.
so the gaps and the needs that were identified in the 2015 report, I think are even more critical to address today,
Yeah.
right? Because we have these many populations in town of pedestrians and bikers. To address your question here, Ian, I snagged on slide 8 is they're kind of the homepage for Complete Streets, Connecticut Department of Transportation, and you'll see if you can pass the eye test here. There is a grant program for community
Nice.
connectivity. There are resources for bicycles and pedestrians. There's a comprehensive strategy for pedestrian safety. And I think we saw, Rolf, did you share that Westport had received a grant for several $100,000?
$500,000 for a sidewalk to be put in. There's a street that runs basically parallel with the Merritt Parkway. And I went on Google and you can go down the street.
Right.
On Google, and yeah, there's no sidewalk on there, and apparently, yeah, they received a $500,000 state grant, but the town also put in another 400.
Right.
So they're gonna put in a whole sidewalk along that whole road.
But I would think that that would be a great opportunity, you know, again, if we're looking at places that are near schools, near transportation centers, right?
So-
These are places that would be eligible for this Complete Streets program.
Can we as citizens apply for the grants, or the town?
I think it's a town, so in conjunction with town planning, state DOT, stuff like that.
I suspect the town's gonna put up some money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not.
Oh, no, it's not Santa Claus. But
But we're doing stuff anyway, so it's
But to
like-
answer your question, yeah, there is money available.
It's good to know it's a way, look, of all the constraints we've identified,
Yeah.
time, focus, et cetera, capital is one of them, so it's a way of addressing that portion of it.
Right,
It's not the only hurdle.
absolutely.
I was watching News 12 a few weeks ago, and they had a segment on sidewalks opening in some town. It wasn't Westport, I forgot where it was. Just very surprised that they had this,
Yeah.
you know, because they did a whole bunch of extensions to the sidewalks, so I guess it was pretty important to have news coverage on that.
So this is a potential avenue for funding,
Absolutely.
depending on the parameters of the program and what it
So,
takes.
so it's not just funding, I think it's guidance
Guidance.
as to if you're gonna be near a transportation center, Merton Heights or Dagger or Talmadge Hill, right? What constitutes a safe street, right? Like, we could just paint a little thing on the shoulder of the road and say, well, now we have a pedestrian spot, but that's not safe. Like, Complete Streets tells you it's gotta be separated by X amount of distance and.
Yeah, the dimensions involved.
Exactly. So
Actually, they
it's-
give you guidance and maybe some.
it's design, they call it design criteria.
It's
You know, there was discussion that's been held about rebuilding a new Norton Heights train station. And it was planned, the initial plan was to be kind of opposite of where Egerton meets with Heights Road.
To move the station down the
The new
length of the
station
track.
would be, yeah, back there, okay, there would be an overpass to the south side parking. And one of the things that was also considered was a roundabout,
I was
just like
gonna
what's
say,
in this picture at that
they're putting in
location.
roundabouts
And would be,
everywhere.
planned to be a complete street.
Can I just say that roundabouts are maybe the worst things?
Oh, I
Yeah, I know,
love
there's
them.
a lot,
No.
there's a lot of controversy about
No,
roundabouts.
they're actually the
not
best
really
thing
so
ever.
safe as you might think.
They're greener, they save the town so much money, you don't have to put in any traffic lights, there's
My
no
personal opinion would be a
idling.
three-way roundabout versus a four-way sounds a lot better. Right, go on with that, it would be a three-way, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, but I think there would be a connection to where the train station would be.
So, parking lot, basically.
Yeah.
So it was Western, just, so on this.
Weston?
Yeah, town of Weston celebrates the installation of the first ever sidewalks.
Oh, yeah, no,
Sorry,
Weston,
that's-
Valley.
That's why I made the news.
Yeah.
So there has no red on it, so they got a little bit of red. Congratulations to Weston.
5,500 linear feet
That's
of
really
new sidewalk.
That's not a lot.
They received $900,000 grant from the state's Community Connectivity Grant Program.
That's exactly what this is.
Complete street.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what that says, community connectivity.
Yeah,
grant
so
program.
community connectivity is at the top of the right
Cool,
column.
let's do it.
Slide down and see it.
So what that does say is it comes with press.
And Ian, you can be the
I was gonna say,
ringmaster.
you will be the press secretary here.
So kind of with all that, as kind of reviewing the PIC report, what is the context, like what do we see as the achievements and not achievements of Public Works to date? You know, I'm moving on to slide 9 as like our recommendations to Public Works from the subcommittee, right? So if there is a PIAC 2, right, we think it would have to have a very different focus than the original one, right? The original one was all about collecting data, doing field work, understanding kind of what the physical world looked like. And I think the PIAC 2, should it come to pass, will be more about prioritization, will be maintaining a more intensive focus on this subject and kind of broadening the engagement, and maybe to your point before, maybe this group could be the arms and legs for Ed and the Public Works Department as they liaise with New Canaan, state agencies, other groups in town to help kind of get stuff done. We know that when we know that volunteers are one of the strengths of this town. And we know that if we engage people to be on a sidewalk committee, as they did in the last PIAC,
Right.
was very impressively done. I mean, they got a very vague mandate, and they delivered a really admirable piece of work. And I think that we would expect no less from a second version if that came to pass. I think the subcommittee wants to stress to Public Works and to the RTM the importance of tackling the more challenging locations in town, right? So this is going to take a greater investment of staff time, capital spend, planning, and even legal resources in order to address the more complicated locations in town, but that's how we make progress on the things that are hard. We want to particularly prioritize development of detailed plans to address critical problem areas. We know that certain detailed plans exist. I know Ed has been, again, the top end of Hoyt. Ed's been through this a couple of times. I know he has at least one set of detailed plans. There may be multiple options on the table. But there are other spaces in town where detailed plans don't exist. We want to mobilize and focus on the problem areas where the plans do exist or where the solutions are evident. And by solutions evident, I mean, I don't think there's any detailed plan for the stretch of Edgerton, for example, from West Avenue north to West Elm. But it's pretty straightforward.
Ed has told me he's actually have 2 sets of plans.
There you
One
go.
for either side of the street.
Right. So there you go. So that's a perfect example. If the plans exist, we should be looking at that and figuring out what the obstacles are and taking the next step to implement. Right?
Totally. Great.
And then last, we want to enhance and strengthen the relationship with state agencies that have the power to either enable these or obstruct these projects, depending on what their disposition is. I think within the town's processes, we want to find ways to spotlight the sidewalk extensions and the crosswalk installations. And we, Rolf and I and with Vinny, we tried to figure out how to do that effectively. Does that mean that maybe we need a separate discussion topic within certain budget meetings or within the operational planning meetings? Does it mean we need to have separate budget line item accounting, like budget lines for sidewalks, crosswalks, and bike lanes? Whereas right now it might be lumped in with infrastructure, just so it enables us to kind of focus on these to the same level of granularity that we think is necessary. We particularly wanted to set some goals, because if you don't set a goal, then what are you shooting at, right? I mean, for me to sit here and say, oh, this is insufficient, is just one man spouting off, right? But, we don't have specific goals to say we want to do either X linear feet per year, or Mark, to your point, we might say it's going to take us 2 years to solve all the mess in and around Darien train station. But at the end of 2 years, we're going to solve all the mess in and around Darien train station between coordinating sidewalks, crosswalks, traffic light timing, other signage. Let's figure that out. Let's tackle it problem area by problem area. Maybe that's how we do it. Or maybe we say, like Ed does with the roads, like right now Ed says basically I get an X amount of budget and I see how much linear feet of road I can do. Maybe we say, okay, how much linear feet of sidewalk can you do? That might be another way to do it. But we have to set some goals and then evaluate whether we delivered on them.
Yeah, I fear in the comparison to the roads, the proper comparison is probably to the regular maintenance on the existing sidewalk stock, where we have very little new road stock in town.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, the roads are
But I mean,
are mostly getting repaved, and whereas we're not bulldozing new roads through,
Yep.
it's a good point. And then last, we wanted to have this Public Works Committee come back and review this analysis and report regularly. So what does regularly mean? I think it depends on other factors, like is there a PIAC2 or not, but at a minimum, we want to say at least once a year, let's have this conversation and let's talk with Ed and say what have we done on a kind of, a very kind of granular quantitative basis. Again, if we're trying to press this forward, maybe it takes a standing committee on Public Works. So
that last bullet, just make sure I understand.
Yep.
This committee getting an update from Ed, I'd like to think that can happen.
We got a picture of it all the time.
Yeah. And now that we have a real solid base and understanding to work off of, I think that exchange can be more granular. But what's transpired this year.
So, and look, nothing I say here should be, again, I'm a huge Ed fan, right? I'm not trying to, Ed's been following.
Let's ask a question.
Yeah, Ed's been following directions to get from the Board of Selectmen. I think it's more a question at the Selectmen level, like how much are we gonna prioritize, maintenance, upgrade, and new sidewalks?
Right.
That prioritization, I kind of read into a couple of these different bullets.
Yeah.
One of the words I have concern with or question about is selecting the challenging location. I could think of words like highest yield, biggest impact.
Most
Most
impactful.
impact, most
Most
impactful.
impactful, like they
I guess
impact the
I
most.
see it, I see this
I don't
as-
ever personally in my
Residents.
life pick the hardest challenge first.
No, no,
Right.
no. My point is that,
But
like,
not to say it shouldn't, not to say
like,
that.
think about, I think about, I mean, maybe this is goofy, but I think about this as like a gymnastics routine, right? I mean, certain moves are higher degrees of difficulty. And I think we've done the moves that are lower degrees of difficulty, and what's left now is the things that are hard,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So, and that's not to
I
say we're taking
agree.
challenges just because they're challenging.
So again,
Right.
but dovetails with prioritization.
But there's two,
Right.
I don't know, the way I see it, you've got a 2x2 matrix, right, which is, you know, cost and degree of difficulty, or maybe it's impact and degree of difficulty.
I think it should be
Right.
impact.
Impacts.
Impact and degree of
Impact,
difficulty, but you gotta
cost,
plot your
yeah.
projects on your 2x2 and be like,
Absolutely.
how many are high impact, low degree of difficulty, we ought to do those, how many are
Yeah.
low impact, high degree of difficulty, let's put like, but we gotta plot that out, have that debate, dialogue, your point is then raise the awareness around it, et cetera.
We've done the stuff that's kind of
Right.
low difficulty, high impact, right? That's the, you know, some of the stuff that was pretty straightforward, right? We now need to
Start moving up that.
start getting things that might be higher degree of difficulty. We don't want to expect to do stuff that's low impact, but if it's high impact, high difficulty, it's time to tackle that.
Right.
I would just like to add that my concern, going through the report and putting together a lot of information, particularly at Crossroads, is the issue of safety. I mean, there are certain intersections that are far more of concern
Yeah.
from a safety viewpoint than others.
Right.
And yeah, there's money involved, and, how much bang for the buck can you get, and that sort of thing, but at the same time, I don't wanna lose track of the safety issue, because that's really a primary driver of this in the first place.
That was, I was assuming that's one of the factors too, impact. Right,
Um,
not just the number of people.
Yeah, that's,
Right, if you want a lot of impact, put it up by the high school and you get 300 kids walking on it every day, or.
But there's actually plenty, if you look at the map, there's a lot of sidewalks in and around,
Most of the schools.
Well, in particular around the high school and Middlesex.
Right, so if you define impact as the number of bodies walking on the street, around there, around the train stations, you get big impact. If you try to make a material move the needle the biggest on safety,
Right.
there's other areas probably. So
Agreed.
you gotta kind of define, yeah, how much you weight those two factors, unfortunately.
That goes into it. I would just, first I want to say thank you
Yeah.
Yes, this
is
to all of
awesome.
you,
That is
because this is,
Very nice.
very impressive, and
Very
and then I just want to make a general observation, which was in particular last Sunday, I was walking around town, did an errand. I don't know when I have ever seen so many people out downtown, walking, using the sidewalks, a lot of pedestrians in front of your place. And that made me really happy, and that is one of the things that you want in a town, is to have people out, and I hope that's happening in Norotan Heights, where I don't go as often. But this is all a really strong impetus to say, let's get sidewalks.
Yeah.
It's funny, someone recently made a comment to me about how they're seeing so many more people out and about in town, especially in the center of town.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's all about sidewalks.
So, let's do
Absolutely.
it.
And it is happening in different parts of town. I'm up near Norotan
And I
Heights.
mean,
And
and I
Norotan
think
Heights
that,
has always been busy at train time.
look,
but now what you are
obviously, the
seeing
center of town is
activity
an obvious place where more people congregate, but that doesn't mean that on some out-of-the-way street that I don't walk on, that that's not important too, but this is the whole impact, cost, benefit analysis.
So I think, again, there's a couple of places that continue to come up as we look at that matrix of kind of volume of use and safety factors, and as well as trying to close gaps. Again, that last chunk of Edgerton from West Avenue north to West Elm, right, is a gap where there's no sidewalk in between two zones where there are plenty of sidewalks, right? And you just get a lot of people who walk down Edgerton and they're walking down the street for,
Yes.
a few hundred yards. It seems like that's an obvious thing that needs to get closed.
I think that one, whoever mentioned, there's two sets of plans, one for one side of the street, one for the other.
I live in that stretch that doesn't have a party, the sidewalk, so. I walk that every day.
So I think that, I don't know for sure, but I suspect the issue there has to do with whose easement do you encroach.
Yep, which side of the street?
Those aren't, that's not like a 3-acre yard that you take just a little bit.
Right.
Right, so I get it, there's
Yeah,
difficult, so these are more difficult challenges to negotiate internally within the town, to negotiate with the residents,
Yep.
to manage from a legal point of view, and And I get that, like, if there's other places in town where you can just kind of tear out an asphalt and put it in concrete, that feels like progress, and it is.
Right.
And it doesn't have the kind of conflict that's involved there.
But maybe we can help.
And so what
in
I'm
these
saying is, I
conflict
think
areas.
it's time for us to start
Yeah.
tackling some of these more challenging locations.
Right.
You know, the other one that comes to mind is, again, Gardner, basically the whole length of Gardner. People are just walking in the street. There.
There's no room for a
That's,
sidewalk
yeah,
there.
that's
So
very
that-
narrow.
So that's a challenge.
I mean, like, literally though, there's no room.
I get it, right? So,
Like, what, are you gonna make a skywalk? Like, you can't make a sidewalk on
Put overhead,
Gardner.
so,
It's kind of by Salt
Got it, I know where it
Box,
is.
off of the post road.
Why?
Yeah,
So-
by the Y.
so it's like, it's the length of, like, if,
It's
yeah,
not-
so,
Maybe not
yeah,
the one
so
way.
it like connects at the top
You would have
almost to
to.
the south side of
Which way?
Northern Heights Railroad Station.
But if you make it one way,
Yep.
then it's a.
And then it goes all the way
wider
down
street.
Post Road.
Then you need another one then.
Yeah, I know where you're at.
And
Yep.
maybe
So
Hollow
I-
Tree is
I'm a very
another one.
visual
I mean, you know,
person,
it-
so
it's hard,
what I
right?
wanna see on a
You know,
map
you
like
have to
this
do a loop.
is,
Yeah.
so colors of something like some of these courts that you'd probably never ever put a sidewalk on. So they'd be
Right.
like blacked out. And then I'd wanna see
Yes.
like up here on, by Talmadge Hill, where it's a safety issue and have those in like
I think what
red.
I think what you can do just mentally, right, is you can say, okay, where are the train stations, right? You have a train station up here at Talmadge Hill, you have a train station at Northern Heights, right around here, and you have a train station at Darien right here, right? So
Spring Hill?
these are some, and Spring Hill's off.
Spring Hill,
Yeah.
it's all right.
But people do come into
Yeah,
Darien from.
some do, yeah, but, so like those three are focus areas, right? Then I plot the 5 schools, the 5 elementary, and the middle school, the high school. I think those are fairly well covered, except if you notice here on, Mansfield. So
Yeah.
it goes up to Overbrook, there's nothing up here
All the way
to
down
here.
Oxford.
Oxridge is up in this zone, and then it goes up to half mile here. Arguably, no matter how much infrastructure you put into Oxford School, nobody can walk there if there's not a sidewalk.
Yeah, and parents from there complain about this. You know, like my kids are at home and they love walking to school. There are probably no walkers at Oxford, right?
I'd imagine.
Kids don't ride their bikes there.
There are, I few that way,
Today,
there's a few, it's
walk and
dangerous.
bike to school day, I think.
Yeah.
Do they?
Which is not
Yeah,
good
today
for
we
your
walk
health
and bike
to
to
not
school.
walk to school.
And then likewise, I think, homeschool on the west side here,
Yeah.
the access from, I mean, there's a very large number of homes in this region that are very close to homeschool, but the absence of sidewalks and crosswalks makes it very hard for most of them to actually walk to school, even though from a distance point of view, it might be quite manageable.
Right.
There's some busy streets there.
Yeah, well, I mean, Hoyt Street is.
There's
Well, no,
no
wait,
sidewalks
wait.
on the east side.
Well, both sides, okay.
No, on the east side of Hoyt, there's no
There's none,
sidewalks.
okay, so
It's on the west side.
Got it.
So these
But there's
roads.
very few crosswalks
So
there.
then what happens,
Okay.
do they have to ride the bus, cause that's more
Yeah, so
money?
yeah, I mean, I think we, for example, if you want to put it in budgetary terms, we probably spend a lot more on bus
Right, that's what I'm
than we might
saying.
necessarily have to. Now, I don't want people to
I don't
construe that.
know.
I'm
Right.
asking you to take away people's
He's
busing.
frank.
I'm not, but I mean, that was an issue a couple of years ago.
Yes.
That's a good point.
Right.
Okay,
Cool.
so I want to pause here. First of all, thank you all for your
Yeah, thank
kind
you.
words. Are there other kind of comments that people want to make about this report, or are there questions that we can answer?
I just have a comment that I think maybe the PIAC too is a especially relevant, kind of thought right now, especially with more people in town, 3 development properties in town, you know, people speeding, pedestrian safety, all of these issues. And it looks like PIAC 1 did a great job in assessing, but now it needs like a phase 2 in my mind to get it to the next.
You're serving up the softball.
He's already got the
So,
motion.
so with that as a springboard, and I completely agree with you. Is there anyone who feels different? I mean,
So, you go ahead and finish what your thought.
Oh, no, I'm good, yeah.
She wants to go back.
so, perfect. So with that said, I'd like to make a motion.
Greg's got a motion.
I know who might second it.
I know I should pass this around this way.
I'm already writing your name down.
And actually, we talked about this, and the idea is, you know, let's have something to wrap up the meeting with.
Right, so it's nice to have a report,
Yeah.
right, but how does things get done? Things get done when you actually take an action.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna make a motion for the Public Works, as now a member of the Public Works Committee, that we want to acknowledge that most of the priorities of the 2015 PIAC report remain unaddressed. The motion should urge the town in general and the Board of Selectmen in particular to recommit to addressing the deficiencies in the sidewalks, crosswalks, and all the forms of pedestrian infrastructure. Number 3, further recommend to the town that we commit to investing greater resources in the planning and execution of the pedestrian infrastructure projects. And 4, further recommend that the next Board of Selectmen establish a second pedestrian infrastructure advisory committee, PIAC 2, to include representation from not just this group, but, health and safety, TGSNA, probably F&B because they've got a finger in everything, right?
They don't want to anymore.
Right, exactly. Well, maybe not. As well as other members of the community, to focus on prioritization of future pedestrian infrastructure projects. And I'd ask for a second on this motion.
So let's.
Yeah, let me ask. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I guess do we need to second it? Yeah.
Paige seconded it about
so we
10
got
minutes
this.
ago.
All right, before Frank spoke then.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let's go through each one, there's a lot
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
You expect nothing less.
No, I know, it's a page shorter than I thought.
I've got volume 2.
So, in the first item, I'm bothered by the word unaddressed.
Yeah, me too.
Because it doesn't take into account what's been addressed and put on
Right.
the shelf, because it's not completed,
Outstanding.
outstanding,
Remain outstanding.
not closed.
And I don't know if I would say
Unaddressed.
most, I would say
How about
many
many?
of
Yeah,
them. Yeah, we just need to soften the language a bit. Soft.
Okay, so if we modify most to many,
Yep.
and if we change unaddressed to outstanding,
Yes.
that sounds like an excellent edit.
Well, that was the easy one.
I'm trying to be positive. So number 2, again, we're urging the town in general and the Board of Selectmen in particular to recommit to addressing these deficiencies.
On that one, I'm concerned that every board of selectmen that's been in place since the original PIAC thinks, believes that they've been committed to addressing deficiencies. So to recommit is,
How about to just
More
commit?
the same?
no, I genuinely do believe that every administration that's been in here, to varying degrees,
Yeah,
has tried
that's
to.
that's
And while it's been, many of the priorities remain outstanding, I don't know how to address.
So I will come back to your point, your comment a moment ago, to varying degrees. I want it to be to a higher degree.
How about if we edit it
I
to the
think we, as
following?
Public Works, should want it to be to a higher degree.
Urges the town and the Board of Selectmen to commit to addressing deficiencies in the sidewalks.
You take out the "re," I'm fine.
Take out the "re" and take out the "specifically," because it feels accusatory.
Okay,
It feels finger pointy
that's fine.
to me.
And the same thing with number 1, right? It's like, oh, someone didn't do their, you know.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
wanna be like,
You don't
we're
wanna
partners
blame-
and we
yeah,
wanna
yeah.
work with you.
But hang on,
Because many
Yeah.
have been done.
Yeah,
Some
but they have done a
Is the
lot.
way to do this, though, to say, like, combine them, right? We're basically urging the town and the Board of Selectmen to commit to addressing deficiencies in sidewalk, crosswalks, and all forms of pedestrian infrastructure based on the 2015 PIAC report.
No, because
But
it
you
sounds
See,
like we
I-
have
the
a,
Board of
Right,
Selectmen
one
has
view.
not had the benefit, if you will, of what you just presented tonight.
I agree.
Right.
Okay, and so if you're gonna go to them and say, you know, we want you to do da, 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 I think you first gotta bring them up to speed with the presentation from tonight to say,
So I'm more than glad to do that.
That's right, that's why I thought you were gonna pull this out to make a presentation to,
the full RTM or the
the
Board of
full
Selectmen?
RTM and
The Board of Selectmen.
the Board of Selectmen, with this assessment.
So I'm absolutely happy to do that if we think that's productive for either of those bodies. What I don't want to do, though, is have this Public Works group, if we are all in agreement that this should be a priority for the town, let's take the opportunity to make a statement that it's a priority for the town. If you don't like this wording, you can toss it out. I don't care, right? I just want to put something in front of this group that says the way this body, the way this team gets anything done is by passing a motion, right? And so if this is a motion to pass, if you don't like this motion, let's pass a different one.
I would argue there's another way that we can take an action. So I'm saying in addition to, right, is we effectively, at least my understanding of Jack's presentation is we can create PAC 2 right now.
Yeah, we don't actually
And
need.
so,
So we considered that, right? And we could create a subcommittee of public works that
Right.
would be focused on sidewalks. The issue I had with that is, and we talked about this in our subcommittee, so, and I'm open to further discussion. I don't want to say like it's not a good idea. We talked
you thought
about
about
this.
it,
So
yeah.
the thing on this is, if it's only a public works thing, then it is one step more challenging to coordinate with health and safety, to coordinate with budget, to coordinate, like, I don't want it to be necessarily pigeonholed.
I
right?
don't
We know
get that. Why is it?
I thought we could liaise with
Yeah.
all the impacted, other committees based on, as long as it's within our assignments or.
So do we want to have some, do we want to invite somebody from health and safety to join our sidewalks standing committee?
Well, I
Is
think
it,
a lot of
you're
your-
indicating is you want it to get prioritized at town level,
I think that's.
and hence drive it down from there, right? I
Right.
think that's what your thinking is that right?
That's
I
the other
think.
piece, is that I think what made the original PIAC as empowered as it was that it was something that the selectmen called into existence. And so they were requesting input from this group, and they were more likely to listen to it, I think, because it came from their request. The fact that,
Top down versus bottom.
yeah, well, I mean, if we come up with something and say, oh, you should be spending, $50 million a year on sidewalks, and here's the ones that we think are most important, I mean, well, that's nice for you, but like, it's not like integrated into the executive side. Excuse me, we're the legislature, they're the executive, but I kind of want to have something that's on the executive side.
Page.
I mean, in all fairness, you're saying that, but you're saying that the original PIAC, all the stuff is still unaddressed. So it sounds like it wasn't that effective, but you're saying that it was more effective to do it that way, and it doesn't look like it was.
It's a fair point.
If I may say, from, going through the report again, I think the PIAC report did a great job of identifying where the problems exist, okay? And it was presented to the Board of Selectmen, but I think what didn't happen was the follow-through.
Yeah.
Right.
What's the plan? When is it gonna be executed? When do we expect things to be completed?
Right.
And who's the group,
Set in the
and who is the group who's gonna spearhead that?
So-
Okay, and that didn't happen
It sounds like a public works
for
thing.
whatever
to me.
reasons.
For the first one, whose idea was it to create the PIC? Was it the Board of Selectmen or was it Public
It was
Works?
Public Works
Okay.
that made exactly this sort of resolution and suggested to the Board of Selectmen that you should call into being a PIAC for the purpose of studying town sidewalks and crosswalks,
Okay.
right? And so I'm kind of trying to follow the same game plan here to say,
Yeah.
What I recall, I think you're right, I want to go back and look at that resolution. But I also think there was some dialogue back and forth and discussions that precipitated that before the resolution was put forth. I don't think it just came out, I want to say out of
Public
nowhere.
works.
so my recollection is that there was a subcommittee just like this one
Uh-huh.
that came up with a recommendation for PIAC. Then there were some heated phone calls that were about, what do you want us to do this for? Resulting in then the mandate, well, if we, the Board of Selectmen, are going to call this into being, then you, Public Works, have to staff it. And so we actually went through an interview process, we actually went through a recruiting process to find people who would serve on that, and we found 9 excellent individuals who were all, some of them were Public Works people, some were other RTM people, and some of them were just members of the community.
Yeah, it wasn't strictly a Public Works Committee
correct. I think
And
there are only
that's-
2 public works
I think
members.
that's what you want,
Exactly.
is a broader base of interest. I'm not even say support, but interest and participation.
Exactly. I
With
agree.
with the blessing of both the RTM and the Board of Selectmen.
So if the, I guess what I'm a little stuck on is, if the need is execution, right? We don't need any more data. We know the projects that need to get done. It's about how the heck do you get them done?
Right.
Which is a function of, you know, money and then all the other resources, Paige, that you keep calling out, right? And so who's gonna work with the state, who's gonna help Ed, like, so that feels like the problem we're trying to solve.
And part of this is creating, like I said before, another pool of volunteers. There are more people who can do stuff that would be helpful to executing these projects.
So where
As
I'm
opposed to
going,
just putting it on public works
I
staff.
think I'm landing more where Paige is, which is, this does feel like a very public works thing. We need arms and legs to get stuff done, and then ultimately, we'll need money, go back to the budget process to achieve it, but I don't know, as I think about what it would take to actually achieve the desired outcome, I think we could recruit volunteers or whatever, but it feels like this is much more execution-focused work than planning focused.
There's an execution component for sure, but I'm still concerned that the prioritization hasn't been defined, or at least isn't aligning with maybe what folks in this room think it should be.
So, right, but I think that.
To pursue any project, I just don't know how.
What I think is the priorities really shouldn't matter, right? I think what matters is that there's some framework of priorities that balances cost and traffic and criticality and all those other things that we just talked about. And
impediments.
So all the desirable things are addressing cost, criticality, and traffic, and also deals with,
The challenge.
the challenges that make these hard. And how do we kind of have a defensible process of setting those priorities? Because again, I think to your point, each Board of Selectmen has addressed sidewalks in its own way, but there hasn't been a consistent kind of decision, like, here's what our, like, there's not been a statement of town priorities. It's really worked for us to close the gaps in the network, or to address everything around the schools, or address everything around railroad stations, right? It's been, opportunistically, what can we get done?
Right, I think we're talking, how do we approach the next steps?
Yeah.
Right.
And we take time and way beyond time.
Right.
But do we do it through Public Works? That's what you're mentioning, or do we take it up to the executive level and get the prioritization down from there? And I think, Vincent, you were mentioning that right at the beginning, right? That how do you get the
Well,
focus?
I think we ought to, the end product should be a presentation to the Board of Selectmen.
And RTM, I feel, right?
With suggestions
Yeah.
on this prioritization, they'll take it or leave it, they'll tweak it, but
So, I think the question is, do you want a motion first? And
we already
then
have a
presen-
motion.
Well, no, I know, so, but a finalized motion, and then a presentation, or could you do the presentation to the Board of Selectmen or RTM, and then come up with a motion, and say in the presentation to the Board of Selectmen, in a very subtle way, we'd like your blessing, otherwise we're gonna do it on our own.
well,
No, I don't think we need that.
I think a lot of work's been done here, a lot of good work, all good work. And I think the Board of Selectmen and staff have the pieces of information we don't have. There's more to this, a lot more. And you guys did a tremendous job in a short period of time. I'm leaning towards, I'd like very much to share. I gotta think about, taking input from this group as to what's the right channel to go to the RTM. Happy to share with the RTM what one of the committees of the RTM has done. I'm thinking the Board of Selectmen, although they'll hear exactly what, has been presented here, but if you want to do it, a public way, a presentation there, and as a next step, if there's some sort of prioritization that speaks to some or all these points here. But most of these, as I said earlier, I think come down to the initial PIAC prioritizing. Question. That's my I'm sharing what my instincts tell me,
So I guess I would
share.
I would just
Sit down
go
here
through
to
this
get a reaction.
point by point. We edited number one to say, acknowledge that many of the priorities of the PIAC report remain outstanding. Does anyone disagree with that?
No?
No.
Yeah.
Two, does anyone disagree with the concept of urging the town and the Board of Selectmen to commit to addressing deficiencies in these infrastructures?
I still maintain every administration thinks
Right,
they have.
so if they think they have, that's great, then they won't argue, then we're all on the same side, right? Then the third point is recommending that the town commit to investing greater resources in planning and execution. Again, as the Public Works Committee, do we disagree with that? Should we be investing more or less in this?
Oh, no, sure, that's it.
Well, we know it's in the budget every year, right?
Yeah, there's money in the budget every year for both sidewalk
Yeah,
maintenance
the money's
repair
being-
as well as new sidewalks.
I
Right.
don't
And
know
it
if-
is higher than it used to be, and not just.
I don't know if it
Place
should be
greater priority
more,
on-
but I think the priority needs to be addressed
Okay.
personally. That's
Just
what I
place
think.
greater priority on.
Yeah, or something to the effect of, rather than greater resources, but, the resources necessary to complete the critical items or something to that effect.
Okay,
Mhm.
You know, you had mentioned earlier in the presentation about having goals.
Right,
right.
to govern
Right.
the prioritization.
And,
Right.
you know, part, parcel and modeling to any goal is the time frame.
Right.
So, you
Sure.
know, what are the goals and
Per
when do you want
year.
to accomplish them?
Because that'll dictate which projects you pursue. Are you
Right.
trying to get?
And could also have an influence over the budget.
Okay,
You know, both.
so,
So maybe we
so
should to
if
set
we,
goals
if we take
and
number three, and we recommend the town commit to establishing quantifiable goals.
And maybe prioritizing resources and planning.
So we're looking for them, for
So-
Board of Selectmen to establish goals.
Establish quantifiable goals,
Sharing thoughts or perspective.
developing and sharing guidelines for prioritization, because I think it should be a public process.
Yeah,
So
I would agree.
Yeah, I think, I certainly think it would be conceivable to come up with a series of, whatever, 5 or 6 lines that say, these are the general guidelines that we would follow in setting priorities.
Absolutely. And maybe we
For
can
us,
get some,
this committee to do
And
that?
PA 2.0.
maybe we could get some of that from Complete Streets Central.
Is that maybe what you're asking, is to have a PAC 2 take it to the next step and set goals and timelines and priorities?
Right,
Not for
the board of
not for the
selectmen.
town to do it, for the act to do
an
it.
objective mechanism
Yeah.
to get there,
Yeah,
not emanating from this.
So is the
18
way you
people or
achieve
14
everything you
people.
just wrote, Frank, to by establishing a PAC2?
Right, okay, so,
The thing is, the realism of what can
Maybe
you get
you
done,
Switch 3 and
particularly
4.
when it comes to
Mhm.
Ed and his resources. And other people are involved as well, traffic, with the
Yeah.
police commission.
There's a lot of
So maybe
constituencies
Frank, if
involved here.
you-
That's,
yeah, that's the issue.
Just
I
thinking
think
this through, if
when you
you
scratch this below the surface here,
switch 3
more
and
of it relates,
4,
a lot of
and
it
then
relates to
take
that.
out this last part of 4, and then that becomes this, that this PIAC commit
Do all
to
that.
setting goals
Yes.
and developing and sharing guidelines, and prioritization and all.
so then, the motion would now be, one, acknowledge that many of the priorities of the 2015 PIAC report are still outstanding. Two, urge the town in general and the Board of Selectmen to commit to addressing deficiencies in this infrastructure.
Mhm.
Three now, old 4, recommends that the next Board of Selectmen establish a second PIAC to include representation from multiple RTM committees and diverse groups in town,
Mhm.
right? In order to, 4, old 3,
3A.
establish quantifiable goals, develop and share guidelines for prioritization, and invest resources to plan and execute the pedestrian infrastructure projects.
That sounds wonderful.
So I'll-
I can get behind that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So if that is the edited and amended
We could just
motion,
read it from top to bottom. I want to make sure we're not rushing something just to get it out here tonight.
right,
right.
so,
When we can, a lot of good work's been done here. if it needs to be tweaked and put something out.
Okay, so, I'll take
Take
it
it from the top.
Take it from the top.
Let's see how it feels.
So it's a motion.
Yeah, I don't want to be sensitive, I realize we're at 10 PM,
Right.
all my years try to keep us inside of 10, so
Got
we'll
it.
try to.
So this is a motion as edited to the Public Works Committee, that number one, acknowledges that many of the priorities of the 2015 PIAC report remain outstanding. Two, we urge the town and the Board of Selectmen to commit to addressing deficiencies in sidewalks, crosswalks, and all forms of pedestrian infrastructure. Three, Old Four, to go further, recommends that the next Board of Selectmen establish the second Pedestrian Infrastructure Advisory Committee, PIAC 2, to include representation from multiple RTM committees and diverse groups in town, comma, in order to, for, Old 3. Establish quantifiable goals, develop and share guidelines for prioritization, and invest resources to plan and execute the pedestrian infrastructure projects.
I think the only thing that maybe should be removed is next Board of Selectmen. I think we should just say Board of Selectmen based on what they were saying, like,
Got it.
the Board of Selectmen is the Board of Selectmen until the new person takes over.
Got it. So that is the edited motion, and I realize it's a mouthful. Compared, but it's
But
actually not that
but
bad
it's
compared to RTM motions.
Could be a lot worse.
Well, you know, they're often, right, but I mean, we know that the motions that come in front of the RTM as a whole all the time are quite lengthy, right? The motions that come in front of the committees are generally much smaller. So this is somewhere in between.
Okay.
Sorry, one more change. I'm actually wondering if we need number 2.
Well, I'm thinking, I was thinking the same thing, there's a lot of components here, I'm concerned about unintended consequences of crafting something that touches on a lot of different areas. And while I know what the intent is, it feels like it's, to me, open. Not-
Could you make it general, like, something along the lines of, ask that the Board of Selectmen support this committee or subcommittee?
Well, if they're calling it into existence, then
Then they
they're
are.
supporting it. If they don't
Right.
support it,
Should
they'll
I
call it into existence.
put this out there, I like the thoughts that are coming around here, I
Mhm.
also,
Mhm.
I'm worried we're trying to jam something.
Right.
And would the subcommittee be willing to maybe take these thoughts and massage them a little bit? I'll call a special meeting if we need to, but,
I'm not taking
That's a
anything
good
back.
point. There's actually also not, there's not a full RTM in October anyway.
anyway.
Right.
Yeah, the
So-
meeting was canceled.
So we have some time,
Right.
and I think it's valid
And
to,
this is, whether this,
Get it
whether we
right.
do this tonight or at a special session,
doesn't matter. Yeah.
the thought doesn't change, the intent doesn't change. And to get this right,
Mhm.
I'm happy to talk about that. I just want to say this while I think about it. The thing that I like about number 2 is that it's specific enough that people understand, oh, this is what we're trying to address, sidewalks, crosswalks. So I am a little concerned that if you take that out, it becomes vague and general. Maybe it can be put into another number and we can shorten it and all of that, which goes to your point of thinking about it a little bit more. But I do want to just bear that in mind.
and I
is a
like
good
that,
point.
because in the context of a presentation, here's what we've come up with. Yes, not everything's, plenty of things haven't been addressed, but what we're really looking for, potentially this committee's looking for, is for the town to recommit. And I liked reconstituted, was it 4 or 3, the last one,
Mhm.
which kind of, to me, that was like summary. It could have been, it probably could have stood on its own, as opposed to, the way it reads with all these different parts, it's like someone hasn't heard the presentation and understood its conclusions versus a presentation, the conclusions, the message delivered, and what's the ask? The ask,
It's the end bit. Yeah.
So,
So,
everyone, does anyone else have anything
No.
they want to add to this?
I think it's something that should be very carefully thought through, okay? And I agree with you, I don't wanna rush something and then later on say, oh, we could have done that a little differently and maybe better had we not rushed through it. Having said that though, I don't wanna lose the momentum that we have here, because a lot of work's been done, and I don't wanna let it just, fall by the wayside, because frankly, that's what happened to the PAC report in the first place. Okay, and I don't wanna let that happen. So I'm definitely open-minded to a special meeting, so, and because it's a special meeting, it's focused on that topic, okay? And we can concentrate and talk it through thoroughly to where everybody's, comfortable with what we come up with an end product to present to either the RTM or the selectmen, whichever, whatever we agree on. So that's my position at the moment, but I'd like to do it in the relative near future. I'd like to do it before the election, okay? Is anybody in a district up for reelection that is with a seat that's being challenged?
I
Oh,
don't even know.
I don't remember what.
Don't know.
I don't remember.
Well, no, I know, I didn't hear what.
I think
it was
Only
uncontested.
District 6, I think.
Only 6.
Only
Only
six.
District
But the
6.
six, there's only one
Are you
issue.
in 6?
Yeah, I'm in
Okay.
6.
Okay, so
Okay.
you are.
So I'm
in
challenged,
jeopardy.
I'm in jeopardy, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you're in my
But there's no
district.
guarantee.
Yeah,
either.
we're not challenged?
We are not.
Right, but we
Currently.
be reassigned to this
Okay.
committee.
Right, but
But
we
somebody
have
could
until
write it,
there,
right?
that
Could have
reassignment.
a
We
right
could,
or
we'd
that
still
there's
meet
no
until
challenge.
that reassignment, right?
That's correct.
That's what we,
I guess, with no disrespect, right, I mean, we as a public works committee have looked at this quite a lot, right? We as a subcommittee have taken another deep dive through all the existing data and all the old report. Again, I'm glad to wordsmith this any way we want, but I do, to Rolf's point, I really don't wanna lose the opportunity to put a stake in the ground and say this is important to us as a public works committee, and it deserves attention and investment. And if it's as simple as that, maybe it's as simple as that.
that,
So,
less is more sometimes.
Right,
You know,
but I-
focus on what's the real ask here.
right,
And
I mean, to me, the other elements are clarifying, and you're right, no one else has heard this presentation, because this is the first time tonight. And if it's helpful to give this to the Board of Selectmen, I'm totally glad to do that, totally glad. And, it's not just mine, it's a committee work, so Rolf can give it or anybody else, to the.
well, the presentation itself is available. You're talking about presenting?
If you think that's valuable, I'm glad to do it.
Next Board of Selectmen meeting?
No, we're not gonna get on their agenda, I mean, this has been a lengthy conversation, and we're not gonna just give us half an hour.
So whether it's presented as is or presented in person,
Right,
I think.
but again, I don't wanna lose
I think in
the,
combination with an ultimate resolution that is put together, I think it goes hand in glove. It has to go together.
Does anybody else have a feeling about a special session to try and focus on this? Yes, no?
so I think technically, I know from a parliamentary point of view, is if this is a motion that's on the floor, right, do we have to vote on this first, or is there a
Well,
motion?
you
that's-
can rescind it,
Withdraw.
or we can vote on
Yeah.
it, withdraw or vote on it.
Okay, so I'd like to,
Call the question.
I'd like,
Or call-
well, I
withdraw.
never called the question, it's an ethical question, but if there is, but I'm not gonna rescind it, because I think this is something that's valuable to
So
vote on.
table it.
If somebody wants to move to table it, I guess that would be a vote.
I don't know if we can table, is that, I have no
Oh,
idea.
gosh,
about
I have no
tabling.
idea.
Tabling a resolution or
A motion.
a motion rather?
I think we'd have to have a vote. to
One way,
table it.
motion up or down, I think we should vote on
Yeah.
it
We could
and then go with
withdraw
that.
or let's see, we've got,
So you
We've
want
got
us
to
to
see,
vote
we gotta-
on it as is?
I'd like us to vote on it as we've amended it, now that we've spent the
If
time to
we
amend
vote
it.
on it, on the, as amended, can we then revisit it?
put
At
another
a,
motion
at
forward.
a.
Yeah, you can always put another
special-
motion out, it's not dead, it's just,
Yeah.
that motion's dead,
Okay.
or passed.
Got it.
Okay.
Or-
Well, it's not Philly.
All right, so, we'll vote then.
All right.
We've got two motions.
Okay,
Want to read it?
you want me to read it one more time? Or-
Would anyone like to read it again?
What do you mean we have two motions?
One last time.
No, we have a motion in a
Revise.
second.
Yes.
We're good. We have a motion on the floor.
Okay.
Does anyone need it? Would anyone like it reread?
Wait,
Yeah, one last.
Nobody actually seconded it.
You did.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
We
You're
did it.
in the record a second.
No, I did not second it. I mentioned it before he started it, but I didn't second
Do
it
you want a
initially.
second?
Well,
Second
then
it?
we don't have a second.
That's what I'm saying. I
So if
didn't
there's no second, we don't have to vote.
Just
Go back to
You
mine.
have to officially second it.
I thought you seconded it.
No, I didn't. She said she seconded it.
Well, we
before-
joked about it, and
and
we
you
took,
said I
we
read
took that to
it.
mean that you
Okay.
did, but,
So
yeah,
Vince
you're right,
seconded
I
it, you
did.
seconded it.
Oh, okay, so we have a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're voting.
Does anyone need it reread?
I would like it reread.
All right, so again, as it's been edited, so it's a motion to, one, acknowledge that many of the priorities of the 2015 PIAC report remain outstanding, that urges the town and the Board of Selectmen to commit to addressing deficiencies in sidewalks, crosswalks, and all forms of pedestrian infrastructure, that recommends that the Board of Selectmen establish a second PIAC 2, to include representation from multiple RTM committees and diverse groups in town, in order to, 4, establish quantifiable goals, develop and share guidelines for prioritization, and invest resources to plan and execute the pedestrian infrastructure projects.
So I believe our two options are to vote or withdraw. We're gonna vote.
I'm ready to vote.
All in favor?
Deciding.
5 yes. All opposed?
I want more time.
3.
Same.
Okay,
I'm gonna go opposed. Oh, one more time.
but it's 4 against 5.
4 5.
So it's passed.
I,
Who's that?
Abstention.
You're
Abstention.
abstaining. Okay.
I still think we should have a special meeting to review the past motion.
Could do that.
yeah,
Okay,
I think,
I'm glad to do that, and we can, I guess, even though we passed it, we could amend it, so.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think this has to be as succinct and eloquent as possible.
Yeah.
So
agreed,
people aren't gonna misinterpret.
exactly.
Right.
Okay, at least we got a stake in the ground.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good, well,
Very
thanks.
good.
Smaller negotiators.
So what,
So
we're
we've
doing
got-
a special session?
Awesome.
Well, yeah, we'll
It'll be.
Okay.
we'll set up a special session. So with
Okay.
regard to the remainder of the agenda,
There's more. Can we do that in special session?
we can table the remaining items. Let me just look here.
What do we got?
Okay, we've got sewer commission, any report? Nothing. Dams and bridges, any updates since last meeting? Nothing. Municipal waste, transfer station, recycle center,
I got nothing.
flooding. Hopefully you all will watch the
Oh, yeah,
video of
you
the
guys asked some good
9/11 meeting.
questions.
Sustainability, coastal waters. On Great Island, I was gonna give the same update I gave to rules. I'd strongly suggest is if you haven't watched the last, GIAC.
You sent the link.
Yeah, the link.
Yeah, it was good.
Let's, I think I said 11 minutes in, 6
Yeah.
minutes in, it goes through the environmental things that were known in much more detail than I've heard before at the time of the purchase, and then actions that have been taken with regard to consultants on remediation. It's worth watching that, we get a more robust conversation. There will be another GIAC meeting before the next report to the RTM since the October meeting is canceled.
We're gonna run out of the
PIA.
GIAC was there first.
Very good. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
No issue seconding that.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, guys.